Hey, happy weekend. How are you riding the energies? How are you riding following the new moon energy that we not long had on the 6th of the 6th? How did it go? I'm going to talk today about the current astrological weather, but this is going to be generic for any time to serve our highest best health on our mental level. So our mental rhetoric is really what we're talking about today with are our thoughts loving? Now this is influenced and inspired, I felt inspired by this in terms of the current astrology with lots of Gemini action with Venus and with the Sun, and we've just had the new moon that's now passed, but we've also got that squaring Saturn. Now I'm going to get into what all that means in a minute, but also this is going to be information that's going to serve our thought care at any point. So I'm going to talk to you today about what's going on with the current energies, how this wisdom can see us through and serve us for any day of the year, any day of the week, any time, and to really just build the next level of a better relationship with ourselves predominantly, and of course that then ripples out into the world around us. So let's get into it. We have had some really beautiful Venusian energy. And so if you've seen my previous videos, you'll know that the Sun, Moon and Venus were all together, all in a conjunction over that new moon period. And that last episode was themed Love is in the Air. And that was around this touch of harmony and this touch of lux and touch of our relationships and how we relate to others, and of course how we relate to ourselves, our values, our aesthetics, both things we find, aesthetically pleasing, but also our values on the inner levels as well, on a deeper level. And that is all still really in play, because although we don't have the new moon there now, we've still got the Sun and Venus together in Gemini. So there's still a lot of Venusian action in terms of there's still this beautiful enhancement to our life force. So the Sun is really about our collective life force. And with that in Gemini, if you've seen previous episodes and if you know about Gemini season, you'll know that it's a time of the social butterfly, it's a time of great communication, it's mental energy, it's lightness, it's sense of humour, it's quick, it's witty, it's curious, it wants to learn. We've got all these beautiful aspects in the life force energy at the moment with the Sun in Gemini. With Venus there as well, where she still is at the moment, next to the Sun in Gemini, we've got a touch of the values and the aesthetics and the beauty and the harmony that I mentioned with our life force. So it's a really beautiful time for connecting with the others in your life, and most importantly, which is what we're going to focus on today, building that relationship with self, the most important one. So without our relationship with self, everything is affected. I mean, you'll know anyway that it has an impact, doesn't it? If we're not in a good place, not just day to day, but if we're generally not treating ourselves with kindness, and if our thoughts are not kind to ourselves, then we know how that impacts our mood and how that also ripples out. So we're going to talk about the mental side of Venus in Gemini, and because Gemini is air energy, as I mentioned, it's the mental level. So air being, it's all the intellect level, but Venus is all about heart. So you've got Venus in Gemini here, bringing some heart, bringing some love, bringing some harmonious energy into this sign of air and of mental energy. Now the plot twist, if you like, to this harmonious aspect is a challenging aspect to Saturn. Now Saturn is the kind of ruler, if you like, of our authority, of discipline, of boundaries, of our longer term lessons. So anywhere where we need to keep ourselves in line, anywhere that needs rules or law and order is ruled by Saturn. So we've got a square to the Sun and Venus with Saturn. Now what the square means is a challenge requiring action. So that action with those essences of the planets that I've mentioned at play together in that relationship is really a great time to be looking at the not only the mental rhetoric of how we're speaking, but also how we're using our energy, how we're thinking about our boundaries. So as part of this topic as well are our thoughts loving. That really also comes because Saturn can be quite hard. Saturn energy at play, particularly in our relationships and our life force energy, might want to make us sometimes retract more into our inner world. It might feel a little bit more isolating. So on the one hand, we've had all this kind of really beautiful, flirty, fun, communicative, sociable energy, and that can largely be at play. That might still be your experience. But there is this other side moving through at the moment with the Saturn square, where we're being called to look at our responsibilities, our boundaries, as I said. So with the boundaries being touched by Venus, because Saturn is being touched by Venus in the way of the square, we get to have a little renewal of our values on boundaries. And this can be really interesting to think about. Are we being protective, having a loving boundary of necessary protection with certain people? Maybe we want to, be a bit more discerning. Saturn's really great for discernment. It's a really great use of Saturn energy to think about, who's appropriate, to think about who we want to spend time with, think about how our energy feels in certain places with certain people, doing certain activities with anything really, how our energy is impacted. But also a really great time to think about how loving our boundaries are with ourselves. So are we being loving? Are we being protective in a lovingly, kind, boundaried way? Or are we being, guarded? Are we being too hard? Are we being too isolating? Are we being too punishing? Because those are the things we want to look out for, and which is what inspired me to talk to you today about our thoughts loving. And I'm going to be really honest, this is ongoing work for me, thinking about, are my thoughts loving? I recently posted yesterday about conditioning, how we show up in the world before we post something on social media, when we walk out the door in the morning, how we are actually, showing up in the world. So are those areas causing any, questions for you? Are you thinking about conditioning in that? Are you thinking about being anything other than yourself? Basically, in my post yesterday, I shared that I was sharing a video, and when I looked back at the first time I saw the video back through, having done a photo shoot, and I saw the video that was going to go out on social media, and I had the fear response come up. I had, almost like a sickness in my tummy of, my legs look really white. What are people going to think? Who is she to, be out there, do X, Y, Z, whatever. And it kind of sounds silly when you say it out loud, but actually that is all about conditioning. And why do we feel like that? Well, because, we might have not felt safe to just shine as our authentic selves at some point. And then over the years, we've listened to, you're too pale, you're too fat, you're too thin, you're too whatever. That we get those messages, plus the massive, ferocious, prolific force that is advertising, that really appeals to our, I want to say, low self-esteem, low self-worth, areas we'd like to improve. Advertising in all its forms is about offering a service. Advertising, it plays to our vulnerable sides. It's psychologically quite clever in that it's here to sell stuff that is based on our confidence levels. Okay, so we know this stuff, get the perfect skin, get the perfect look, and this was part of my post was, I am in this. I talk about this, but I'm as much in it as you are. When we're thinking about these things, we're going through it together. because, you know, we're all evolving together, aren't we? And if I can share something that can, you know, spark thought or consideration or support for someone else, then happy days, because we can, you know, grow together. And this was the thing with me with the white legs. You know, the reality is surfing, as what I was doing in the video, surfing in May in the UK is unfortunately all about white legs and flat spells. You know, the reality is it's not going to be, you know, brown bodies listening to Jack Johnson on the beach with massive waves rolling in. You know, the reality is it's cold, and, you know, this is just kind of the authenticity that I'm touching on, really. And I think it's really key for our awareness to look at, firstly, why we're considering other people's opinions when we put something out, why we're fearing judgment, why we care what others think. So that is all of the conditioning stuff. That is the messages we receive: too fat, too thin, too pale, too whatever. But then the second point being really key is that with awareness of that, so I caught myself worrying about my legs being too white, put the video out anyway, and realised that process. So in that, you know, it's an invitation to, when we see our conditioning, when we see where we're not showing up because of fear, where we see where our thoughts have kicked in negatively, we get to change it and we get to choose differently. And that's what's actually really empowering about, you know, the evolution process. It's not going to be all, you know, smooth. It's not going to all feel comfortable, because otherwise we wouldn't be growing. So yeah, it's really an opportunity to empower ourselves to grow beyond sometimes our comfort zones and beyond conditioning. So back to the mental rhetoric and some thought care. Let's have a think now about our thinking. And I invite you to think as you go through. So with your general day, you know, how are you spending your inner time with yourself? I appreciate lots of us, myself included, will have days where we're rushing around. We've got things to juggle: school runs, business, work, partners, you know, whatever the things are, and trying to find, you know, time for hobbies and whatever else. There's a lot to juggle. And so in that, and especially with that, we can either sometimes go into, you know, subconscious, we can go into autopilot, we can not be aware too much of our inner world. And so I'd really invite you to think about, you know, how your mental rhetoric is, how your inner conversations with yourself are, you know, just even in terms of, you know, if you dropped something or if you spill something, you know, what's the first thing you say? Do you say, oh, you silly dick, or something like that? You know, just say you just say something chastising to yourself? Or do you, you know, without even thinking? This is the thing, because often a lot of the time this stuff has just been going on forever, so we don't notice. When you put clothes on in the morning, do you know, how are you about your appearance? Are you critical? Are there thoughts where, you know, you've gotten used to, I don't know, maybe not being happy with your body, and so you've gotten very used to saying, oh, about when you look in the mirror, or I wish X, Y, and Z were different about my body? You know, have you gotten so used to those thoughts being there that you can't kind of imagine, either maybe haven't even noticed them because they've become so repetitive and so normal, or are you you know, able to kind of look at that and go, right, okay, I really want to not be held hostage by things like conditioning, and we're a part of it. We're a part of it by being victims to it, but that's not, you know, to beat ourselves with a stick about. That's just that we're learning. Of course, we're humans, we're going to make mistakes. We wouldn't be growing if we didn't. So this is the beauty. We get to see these things, we get to have these conversations, and we get to look at where we want to next grow, where we want to next stretch ourselves, where we want to next come out of the comfort zone. And the self-care and the holistic stuff, which is why I come back to this in pretty much all conversations I have. And this stuff I'm so passionate about. I've had a holistics business for 8 years or so. And why I'm so passionate about the holistics is because this stuff isn't always innately taught or known by us. You know, I don't know about you, but I wasn't brought up I was brought up by a loving parent, but I wasn't brought up with the role modeling of this is how you talk to yourself, this is how you value yourself, this is self-love. I wasn't really taught or shown those concepts. And then think about school, like at no point through school, school was probably even worse in terms of the messaging there, in terms of the needing, feeling the need to fit in, to conform, to have the certain lipstick colour or jacket or whatever it was. That was my experience, big experience of conditioning and needing to fit in at school. And largely I think that's really tricky in the mainstream education system still. Having a 12-year-old there now, it's really tricky. So yeah, it's just really interesting to think about our messaging, where we've experienced our wellness tips, and if you didn't have them, this is one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about delivering them, and why I've set up a holistics business, and why also I know I can't reach as many people as I'd like purely in person. So I've set up an online Reiki school that will eventually include other courses. So it's really important to me to share and speak about these things, because I didn't experience them. And like I say, I don't know how many of you will do. If you've had an amazing childhood, that's so fortunate. And if you've had those messages, those really reassuring messages, you may be someone who's, got a really good mental rhetoric. And maybe then it's just about thinking about maintaining, because of course then, there can be episodes in life, stress, trauma, life events, illness, tiredness. All of these things can also dip our thoughts. So some tools around either improving our negative self-talk from conditioning, and some maintenance. So if you're already in a good place, great, because that's the thing, isn't it? It's like watering the garden. We hear that, I've heard that quote before about mental health. The mind is like the garden, in terms of the seed you plant it and how well you water it and nurture it each day with love and with what it needs and with nourishment. And we think about the body in that way as well. What are we putting in? So it's those things that I think are really key to thought care. Of course, one area of self-care really that I'm feeling that term at the moment, with all this mental energy and the loving harmonious energy of Venus, but with that square to Saturn, the boundaries, the discernment, the potential punishment, these kind of things that we want to really bring into a loving place, bring into loving boundaries, because boundaries are protective. And I think that's a real gift from Saturn as well in this mix. And we want to make sure we're on the right side of Saturn and bringing in, utilizing the energy in the best way for us to assist our relationship with ourselves, that will assist our relationship with others. So some tools for thought care. Noticing how you speak to yourself in your own mind throughout a day. Maybe keeping a little journal. Again, you don't have to be writing reams and reams. It doesn't have to be an essay, but maybe have it somewhere handy, like in the kitchen, and you can think when each time you're preparing something, or maybe making a cup of tea, as the kettle's boiling, you can just think about the last thought you had, and how many few times that day it's shown up, if there's something repetitive, if there's something indicative of your attention. What are your thoughts, trying to say to you? Is the body, mind or spirit, is it trying to get your attention in some way? Is there a niggle that's asking for your attention? Sometimes when we have repetition, there can be something that's either requiring some more love or healing or care, or some kind of nurturing. So have a look, see if there's any themes in your mental rhetoric throughout a day. Notice how critical it is. Is there lots of punishments, negative comments, chastising, criticism? Is it a parent's voice? Is it, an old teacher's voice? Is it when you were bullied? Is it, have a look at these things and just see if and where they might be showing up in your mental fields. That's the first thing really, to identify it. So I'd say a journaling practice is great for that. And then it's looking at the themes and what that means. How you interpret that now. So, for example, you know, is there something that's a theme of not feeling good enough? You know, is it something that feels you're wanting to please others more than you can kind of please yourself, and that's a kind of never achievable thing? Is there something where you're, you know, wanting to highly achieve all the time? That kind of thing. Notice if there's perhaps any of those themes, and then see how you can soothe it. So thirdly, the third thing, maybe see how you can soothe. Let's think about this in maybe 3 simple steps. So looking at what you're doing, looking at the themes, looking at what that's pointing to, and then the third thing is kind of answering that theme, answering that kind of topic of what's come up. So, you know, I'll share mine. The you know, having maybe not felt like I fitted in, not felt good enough, not felt pretty enough, brown enough, you know, all of that kind of stuff. Is generally across the board, it's a not feeling good enough umbrella. So how do I remedy that and support that? Is just nourish on myself. And this is not something I was taught innately again. So this is where the holistics again started, was because that's what I needed. And that's why I'm so passionate about sharing it with others, because they're things that have really helped me. So for you, it's finding those tools that are really helpful. You know, there's the Reiki, and there's astrology and tarot and all the things I do and I love. If any of those sing to you, then great, I can hook you up. If not, and you can find, you know, you can think of the things that really resonate with you and speak to you, and they don't have to cost any money. There can be beach walks, you know, wet sand beach walks are amazing for earthing, grounding, connecting back with self, that quiet time, coming away from the noise as well, because when we're busy it's more likely to be noisy in our minds as well, that reflection. So if we can take the odd day out, I mean, ideally it would be a day out here and there. If that's too much of a stretch, even 5 minutes with feet in the earth in the garden, if we haven't got anything else, as a minimum, you know. And then of course there's all of the other self-care tips, you know, the hot bath, but not just a bath, like really ham it up with, if you were doing it as if you were doing it for a partner, you know, get the salts, get the rose petals, your favorite music playing, the candles on, just for you. Because that's the thing, is the lengths that we would normally go to for others without question is not always the lengths that we will go to for ourselves. So really go to town with the self-care, ring fence that time to really be in your space, valuing, nurturing yourself. These are really good ones for not feeling good enough, but also just that really help maintain great health and great well-being. You know, if you're already nailing it with the self-talk and not feeling you know, any of these themes are kind of resonating for you, then it's just about maintaining that, you know, again, still watering that garden with positive thoughts and not letting the balance slip out, because it's so easy for us to be pouring it out to everyone else, to kids, to partners, to jobs, to even to passions and pursuits and hobbies, you know, even good intention things that take up our time and energy. So it's just really important to bring that balance in, which I feel the current astrology is really calling for at the moment and supporting. So we get to utilise the energy, we get to really pull it in and support. I'd love to hear your favourite self-care tip in the comments. I've given you a few of mine. Please drop in yours, because then we can get a bit more of a self-care, thought care bank going, and fill it up and share them. So that would be really, really great. I'd love that. And in the meantime, to kind of start to wind down and close, make sure I haven't missed anything, and we're going to have an oracle card. Now I'm using the Rose Oracle by the beautiful Rebecca Campbell. I'm absolutely stoked, as always. I always say this, to be bringing you my own oracle deck as soon as possible. Busily working away on that in the background, but for now I'm using the rose because it's beautiful, feminine, Venusian energy, really, the rose. And so I'm just going to set the intention that we have a card for the highest good of all to support us for the week ahead. That one wants to pop out. Let's have a look there. Okay, so that's really nice and interesting timing. So we've got morning dew, clarity, a fresh start and a positive outlook. I love this for the fresh kind of air energy that I was talking about with the mental side of Gemini, and what we're talking about with our, you know, really clearing our thoughts. So I absolutely love that. Morning dew, I think that actually feeds into another self-care tip as well. I mean, how nourishing is morning dew? If you think about getting out at dawn, or soon, you know, as soon as you wake up, even whatever time of the day it is, even as soon as you wake up, rather than reach for your phone, get your feet out on the wet grass on the morning dew. Like, how stunning is that, and how nourishing is that? That would be a great self-care and thought care tip, because that's the other thing, you know, our bombardment of screens and information is really kind of bombarding on a mental level. And this is another thing that really impacts our thinking and how loving our thinking is. So plane mode, getting to bed early without screen time in that last couple of hours, I'd say an hour minimum, but last few hours before bed with no screen, just to start to cleanse and clear your thoughts before bed. Not being on the screen for extended periods of time, because I personally find it really draining, and that can give me a bit of a fuzzy head. So again, thinking about any practices that are really helpful for sort of clarifying and really cleansing our thoughts as well as our whole system. So I hope you found that helpful today. Please drop any comments or questions. I'm more than happy to answer them. And I wish you all the best for this week ahead. Enjoy the Venus energy and your loving boundaries on yourself, and let me know your thought care tips. Much love.